Well, I just loved it from day one. So, because I was already a fan of the music that Factory released, and when I heard that they were opening this club, I went down with a friend from university. We both bought membership cards, £5.51 because it's Fact 51. Everything sort of always got the details just right. The bigger picture maybe not, but anyway, the details were always right. And so I went on the first night, which was a Thursday. And it was just huge. I'd never seen anything like it.
There's a description that Linda Sterling, who is the lead singer of the band Ludus, so she said in terms of the early years that, quote, the Hacienda was this male preserve. They were showing lots of soft porn and they thought it was really cool. Repetitive reels of pornography residing over the dance floor. Kath Carroll and Liz Naylor managed Ludus for a short while. Importantly, they were instrumental at the concert at the Hacienda in November 1982. Where I wore a dress decorated with raw meat. They then tied bloody Tampax to the banisters of the Hacienda, and at this point, the management really panicked. They didn't want Ben Kelly's oak floor stained. I finished singing the last song to absolute silence from the audience. It was bonfire night, gunpowder, treason, and plot.
Right from day one, they had these big screens kind of at the back of the stage where they showed videos, and the guy who put them on was Claude Bessy, who was called the VJ, the video jockey, and it was always quite controversial. And he juxtaposed, so the DJ was putting on the records, and he was playing videos that didn't particularly have anything to do with the records. Occasionally there'd be a music video, but generally it was just like kind of old Walt Disney cartoons from the early days, like black and white Mickey Mouse, and then I think that Nazi propaganda and porn and stuff that they would just kind of flash in front of me, think, hang on, and then it'd move on to something else.
So when I was like 13, 14, I was hanging around with my brother's friends who were all like 3 years older. They were all Manchester Grammar School boys and quite trendy, and one of my brother's friends, Ben, his mum was the manageress of the Hacienda at the time. He actually had his 18th birthday party in the Gay Traitor, which was super cool. So yeah, so we went to that. So that was probably like the first time I went, I think, probably.
Ultimately, around 88, it was like the perfect warehouse for dance parties. The Hacienda just fitted in so well with that. It's almost like I've been waiting for 5, 6 years for that particular function.
The Hacienda to walk into at this time, which was late 80s, was completely overwhelming. It was huge and it was rammed and it was really, really going off in there. It was wall-to-wall people going mad, dancing crazily. It was so hot. It was just, you would just be drenched with sweat. And the music was really loud, and it was such a cavernous space because it was a factory. It would just boom and ricochet around the room, you know.
You know, it suddenly became really, really busy and, you know, really dancey. Everyone sort of changed the way they were dressed. They were wearing brightly coloured clothes. There seemed to be a whole group of people that were coming from the outskirts of Manchester that were all suddenly joined together, sort of queuing up, going. You'd sort of see them getting ready in bars nearby, and sort of there seemed to be a whole buzz like about the city of people sort of making their way to the Hacienda, almost like a religious experience, you know.
And then Flesh brought something additional to that craziness and that frenzy. It brought a whole different layer of hedonism with it, which was wild in a different way. It was very liberating. It was, you know, people could be themselves, people could be free there. Manchester had had a recent history at that time of being under the control of James Anderton, who was the police chief in Manchester, also known as God's Cop. He was famous for saying that gay people with aides were swirling around in a cesspit of their own making. So lesbians and gay men were starting to work together pretty much for the first time. That meant that we wanted to party together as well. And so Flesh was a very visual explosion of that happening.
I mean, I was taking my A-levels, and you know, it was a common fact in our class that me and Eleanor were sort of Hacienda girls kind of thing, and we'd sort of come back and sleep through lessons, and even the teachers of one of our subjects used to be like big Northern Soul heads and go to Twisted Wheel and all this, and they were kind of got it, and they were like asking us all these questions like, what's it like at the Hacienda? Is it like as good as they say it is? And we were like, yeah, yeah, it is.
All of a sudden, it was packed. Everybody was dancing with their arms up in the air. And, you know, I don't know what they were taking, but I do know that if you went to the bar, there wasn't a queue to get a drink. It was really easy to get a drink. And I bumped into Nathan McGough, who then was manager of Happy Mondays, but he'd worked behind the bar with me from when it first opened. And I really liked him. He was brilliant. It was really good fun, but always a very sharp dresser. And then suddenly there he is with his long hair and his baggy T-shirt. And I don't know, it was kind of a bit of a disappointment, really.
Yeah, when I ended up getting asked to do the Hacienda, I had to say yes, obviously. I mean, that's an opportunity you didn't turn down. However, I was so nervous. I was just freaked me out, to be honest. It was just brilliant because the response was incredible, really incredible. You know, people were just vibing. And even if the Hacienda had a cut-out switch on it, so if the music got too loud, it would just go, the sound would go completely in the club. But you'd have the monitors on so loud in the DJ box, which was above the whole room. So you look down, you could see the crowd. So you'd be in there with the sound in the monitors, really like, yeah, this is sounding great. And you just look down and go, oh, what's going on down there? Turn it down. No music at all in the whole of the Hacienda. Not a good feeling. It's hard to see, but you can see the limiter on the mixer that used to catch me out when I'd knock the whole sound off in the club. So then you have to bring the levels down and then slowly bring them up. Every time that happened, you just start bringing them up. The crowd would go mental because the music had come back on and they'd love it. So even kind of when you screwed up, the crowd were totally with you anyway.
One of the things that's quite significant about the Hacienda is for how long it existed as a space. And one of the other things I think that's quite significant, oftentimes a venue as kind of both a cultural space and also just a space for performance will be tied with a specific genre or era of music, whereas the Hacienda covered a lot more than you'd kind of expect.
They sound like crazy times, and perhaps they were, and perhaps there were things happening that maybe you couldn't repeat at the moment, but there was always a bit of a precarious relationship to the police, I think. To be quite honest with you, I think it was time to close it. The interior started to look not that fresh anymore. It looked a bit mouldy from all the hot, sweaty nights that have been had there.
Towards the end of the Hacienda, it was really getting taken over by gangsters. They were running the door. And at the time, Manchester was known as Gunchester. So on a lot of the nights, like on the normal Friday and Saturday nights, it had just got a sort of like it lost something.
The trouble with the bouncers is well documented, but I think I managed to not really be affected by it too much, and the gangs and stuff. I mean, I was there the night when we were all asked to leave with the riot shields, and there were snipers up on the roof and stuff, because I think they thought someone had brought a gun in or something. They closed it down. And that was really weird. That was really scary. They was feeding us all out single file, all like wide-eyed and off our faces to the riot police. Yeah, and I think we start to realise it was all getting a bit dark then. A message from the police to everyone that they're about to be closed down, and everyone please stop openly drug taking.
I know that it got the whole kind of drug thing and gangsters, and I don't know, because I wasn't going there anymore, I just thought it was a bit of a shame because it could have been such a great place, but maybe it had its time. It really felt like it was our place, and you were just kind of proud of it. And there were anyone who came to Manchester who knew anything about culture would come to the Hacienda, and it was really, really special.
If I had to use one word to describe the Hacienda, I would call it a social experiment. I think some things about it were a spectacular success, even if it was not financially one, for the people who are running it.
I was quite relieved, really, because it happened, it was over, it was done. And I mean, apart from the fact it was a great building, I absolutely loved that building. The Roundhouse was a real Manchester landmark. Sad to see that go, but glad that nobody could reopen it as you know, some heritage oddity or something.
Because everyone has their own version of the Hacienda, and I think that's how it's always going to be. And there were definitely different time periods. But to sum it up in one sentence, I loved the Hacienda.
I mean, the Hacienda has such a mythical value now in Manchester, and I think it had some really special aspects to it. But at the same time, you know, I think people should just invent their own Hacienda. I mean, the whole notion of the Hacienda is that it doesn't exist. You have to build it. So you have to make your own Hacienda. And that was ours in the 80s and 90s.